The old television set in the corner of Matt's living room flickered to life, its glass screen radiating an eerie glow. It was a relic from the 70s, purchased at a garage sale, along with a stack of VHS tapes labeled with cryptic titles: Nightmare Carnival, The Last Broadcast, and Evil Replays. He didn't think much of it at first, just a quirky addition to his collection of retro items. But as the winter winds howled against the windows, it started to draw him in. One chill late night, as snow swirled outside, Matt plopped down on the couch, a warm blanket cocooning his body. He grabbed a tape labeled Legend of the Forgotten, a film he'd never seen before, and slid it into the player. As the screen began to swirl with static and the atmosphere thickened, he was pulled into the story. A quaint little town besieged by horror movie characters who stepped forth from the screen to terrorize the inhabitants. He chuckled at the absurdity of it all. The first scenes faded, and before long, sinister figures crept across the screen. Strange sounds echoed in his dim apartment, reminiscent of whispers and ghostly laughter. He shook his head, attributing them to the wind or his imagination running wild. Eventually, he fell asleep, lulled by the nostalgia of grainy film and ghost stories. Matt awoke with a start, groggy and disoriented, as the movie's screams and desperate cries echoed in his ears. The screen was dark now, but in the faint light, he could see a shadowy figure prowling through his living room. His heart raced, and he rubbed his eyes, convinced he was still dreaming. But then he saw it. There, standing at the foot of his couch, hand outstretched, was a woman clad in old-fashioned clothing, face painted ghostly white, with wide, hollow eyes that glistened in the dim light, the iconic ghost from Evil Replays. Behind her loomed a tall, menacing figure with a glinting knife, a visage none other than the infamous slasher from Nightmare Carnival. Panic surged through Matt as he scrambled to his feet. Sick of being just characters, shrieked the ghost, her voice like nails on a chalkboard. We thrive on fear, and now, thanks to your foolishness, our world collides. Matt's heart drummed in his chest as he glanced at the TV, light now spilling across the room like blood. An array of monsters began to flicker in and out of existence, hopping directly from the screen to reality. He stumbled to the back of his apartment, heart thumping as he realized he was no longer alone. A grisly creature from The Last Broadcast, a deformed mass adorned with snarling teeth and beady eyes, lurked just beyond the door. It snickered softly, low and unnerving. Chaos ensued as characters began emerging one after another, an axe-wielding maniac, a ghastly witch, and spontaneous bursts of laughter from masked figures whose eyes glowed with malicious delight. They muscled through walls of shadows, encircling him, growing bolder with every flicker of the screen. The air grew thicker, tinged with malice, as they began to chant. "Come play with us, forever." He scrambled toward the old television set, desperately trying to power it off, but nothing happened. The very cable he'd thought was broken coiled like a snake, pulsating with energy. He could feel their presence closing in, darkness curling around his thoughts, their intentions clear. "Join us." The butchered figure beckoned, knife glimmering ominously. "Playtime is eternal. You'll never escape us." Matt's mind raced. He thought of a way out, some trick, some prerogative that could reverse this madness. As the figures pressed closer, he lunged for the remote, vowing to stop the torment. He mashed the buttons with trembling fingers, each character inching closer, taunting him as he desperately searched. "End this. I'm not afraid," he shouted, though terror rattled through him. Then he found it, the eject button. With sheer will, he pressed it. The tape whirred and released, the characters faltering momentarily as Matt hurled it from the player. In a sudden burst, a blinding light erupted from the screen. The characters wailed, their forms turning into smoke, being sucked back into the pit of unreal horror. Matt shut his eyes, soaked in sweat. When he finally opened them, the room was still. The television was blank, the oppressive atmosphere replaced with a haunting silence. He stood panting, surrounded by echoes of terror that lingered in his mind. But then he noticed it. On the floor lay a crumpled map of the town. Its corners were stained with something dark, blood, perhaps. The shadow of a familiar knife glinted in the corner of his eye, the outlines of old horrors not yet forgotten beginning to creep back into view, always waiting for their chance to break into the real world once more. And he knew, deep down, that the night had only just begun.